I have recently fallen in love with Boji of Ranking of Kings, and the fantasy world as it's unraveling is a rabbit hole. But similar to every other reviewer talking about this show, I'm gonna echo as well, you shouldn't just judge this book by its cover. There's so much more depth, twists and turns, and maturity that actually lurks under the childish and whimsical cover. But I think uniquely, I have to admit that my experience might actually have been enhanced by the fact that I went in with certain expectations, and I've been noticing this as a trend, especially with a lot of adult cartoon animations. So let's talk about judging books by their covers, and how Ranking of Kings is a masterclass at playing against your expectations. In today's video, thank you so much, is brought to you by Anvil Vaultbreakers. Anvil is this really ridiculously arcade top-down twin-stick shooter roguelike action RPG game that you can play co-op. It's even cross-platform between Steam and Xbox. Play on Game Pass. It's always better with friends, especially if you're a fan of co-oping or playing endgame of action RPGs, but you don't want to slog through a ridiculously slow campaign. This is it. You just jump in and there's laser beams and explosions and giant alien monsters to slap around with your friends. This game has an ongoing development cycle, so we got new difficulty levels, and the newest season's gonna come in March, where we're gonna have a whole new play mode called Journey, and new classes to look forward to. The game is always updating, ever expanding. We just got new languages, Vietnamese, Italian, and Thai, right there in the January updates. So if you guys are looking for something that's new, fresh, and different in the genre, I bet you got a couple of friends that want to play too. This is it. Check out Anvil Vaultbreakers. The download link's below. There is an unfathomable amount of art to see, music to hear, shows to watch, and books to read. Let alone that competing with a modern world that keeps us busier than ever. It's reasonable that any one person won't experience everything. Evolution. We have grown to have short attention spans and very quick to judge things as worth our time or not. However, there are some things that truly are deserving of at least a chance to impact your life. And actually, there are works of art that directly play with the idea of how its cover is being judged, and then through that experience helps to build a story between lines that couldn't be told otherwise. Ranking of Kings looks like an old school anime, especially the Tezuka inspired drawings and the styling. It even looks very Disney because a lot of old anime was inspired by Disney, and especially this being a storybook fantasy shonen absolutely looks almost at first glance, based on the trailers, maybe a few videos that you've seen, kind of like a budget fantasy slice of life adventure. But I promise you that Wit Studio does a phenomenal job and creates some incredibly dynamic shots that I've never seen before, I think ever. I've never seen these angles in drawn animated series. I am truly impressed. But more so that's surprising is obviously the tone. And yes, that is Ranking of Kings' gimmick. It draws you in with this old school art style, it draws you in with this sweetness, and that actually pervades throughout the whole story. But just know that Ranking of Kings is a mature storybook fantasy that takes more inspiration from the original European-based fairy tales. Now, this setting isn't grimdark like something that you might see in Made in Abyss, which is another show that literally does exactly the same thing as Ranking of Kings, except from the get-go you know that it's absolute top-of-the-line quality with its music, with its art design, and with its action scenes. Ranking of Kings hides that a little bit with this retro aesthetic, but that as well is designed, I believe, there to disarm you. Everything from how this show looks is meant to sort of peel away the layers of armor that you might have built up as an adult and bring you back down to being a child again. So once you start watching the show with open wide eyes and all the twists and turns happen, then it's going to impact you just a little bit more strongly. If Ranking of Kings looked like Game of Thrones, it wouldn't have the same slap that it does as a Tezuka looking anime. And I think this hits most home because our main character is disabled. He is deaf and as well mute, and you really get a sense of the cruelty of the world because of how sweet and innocent our main character is. And while there's no spoilers in this video, I will let you know that a lot of the villains, if not every character in this show, actually has some innocence to them that you then learn gets like perverted in some way, or that it's really the world itself and the situations that everyone's been put in that has forced everyone to sort of grow up and become cruel themselves in order to survive, or to create kingdoms that will actually be able to survive. But Ranking of Kings, I believe the moral that I'm seeing so far is very clearly shonen. It is a moral that I have loved forever and is beloved for everyone that reads shonens, and it's that maintaining the keeping of that childlike innocence from Goku to Luffy, and it actually is even the main moral, I think, of the seinen show, which is probably even more parallel to Ranking of Kings, which is Made in Abyss, where it is an incredibly dark, maybe actually grimdark universe, but the characters, regardless of the most brutal and grotesque and creepy imagery ever that I've seen, actually maintain their innocence, maintain their optimism, and maintain the momentum of the adventure. And that's what Ranking of Kings is. Just a little bit more whimsy and shonen. But after a video or two, or maybe even an episode, you might have kind of begun to understand the juxtaposition of little childish, whimsical characters and their adventures, and then the adult situations they find themselves in. Sometimes the grotesque imagery, the creepiness, and yeah, the absolute like gore that can occur. But now armed with that, the judgment of the book's cover that you might have seen from the show so far, there's actually another layer. Let's turn another page and let's talk about how Ranking of Kings handles mental strife. Because I feel like aside from the Jinx character in Arcane, or very rarely in specifically adult cartoons, do I sometimes see moral compasses shake and waver? Do I see the insides of a character? But this show, Ranking of Kings, it is every single character, just about. Even some that you think are copy paste and just thrown in there, much like most of the show. Judge the book by its cover, it wants you to, and then you find out there's more complexity to that character. There is a reason why they are the way they are, or sometimes if you're not paying attention, you might lose track of which side which characters are on, and even in the middle of fights, sometimes they change their mind and they like half step and they're like, oh, I'm gonna do this thing to help them, but like actually we're gonna kill them later. I don't know, maybe. It's a little silly just trying to explain it without spoiling it, but in the end, Ranking of Kings takes its mentals very seriously, sincerely. It is to a point of anguish. It is not afraid to stick the camera on one character and just, like you would expect a fight scene, like a montage, like a barrage of fists in a face. No, instead, it is just characters crying and wailing and expressing themselves, and you start to see their insides, and it's a little funny, or I guess ironic saying that, since our main character actually has problems expressing themselves. And I actually feel that that is sort of projected on every character. Every character has a mask on. Every character is playing a role in this kind of fucked up world, and every character has problems handling their emotions. Everyone makes mistakes. No one is a single note. And I think that is the most fun thing about a show that seemingly is one note at first glance. And that is the turning of the pages. That is the moral in the story of Ranking of Kings. In a genre with characters that are literally Superman, but also have the one-note character traits of invincible optimism and so hard-headed it's literally a superpower, Ranking of Kings allows its characters to be superhuman and cartoon and ridiculous, and yet so human and vulnerable. I've seen dark anime like Devilman. I've seen really gruesome moments that made me cringe and wince in pain from adult animations, but I've never been so punched in the gut, so physically affected from the anguish of a shonen main character's hurt heart. I love Boji. And I'm falling in love with the unraveling of this fantasy world and the story, the epic that Boji is on, and Kage and everyone else. I want to see how the villains could potentially redeem themselves. I want to see how these heroes might be twisted and turned. Is this fantasy whimsical world actually a hellscape? I want to learn more. I'm strapped into the roller coaster, and I'm absolutely fine, more than, with judging this book by its cover and turning the page. And I am ready to be surprised.